Hey, welcome everybody to this week's installment of the Google Hangout with Fran Tarkenton. My name is Ed Fox. I'm joined by Harry the Hat down there in your corner, and of course the one and only Fran Tarkenton himself. We're going to continue. We always do these Hangouts at least twice a month for you. We're going to continue to do it to always try to provide and bring useful information, helpful information for you and your business. Today we're going to discuss behavioral management and how that can lead and have a direct effect on your corporate management as well as job performance. So without further ado, let's go ahead and just get started. Fran, I've been on the internet recently and getting all these postcards for this Get Motivated seminar where these people come up and they do motivational speeches and they swear this will change your life and will do good for you. What do you think about that?
Garbage. Wouldn't it be nice that if we could eat different foods and make us bigger, faster, stronger? But it doesn't. It might be healthier for us. That I could go and listen to a motivational speaker or pep talk, and it would make me run faster, throw more accurate passes, do better in business, and it's all about a quick fix. And we are been intrigued all of our lives with motivation. I go back in the old coaches and all the movies of the old coaches. It was all about some motivational speech, and the greatest coaches were supposed to be the greatest motivators. Probably the greatest coach in the history of the world. Google him up, Newt Rockne, Notre Dame. Back in the 1900s, from 1900 to 1950, Notre Dame dominated. It was the greatest teams, greatest players, greatest coaches, and Newt Rockne was the greatest coaches of all. And they had a movie about Newt Rockne, and they had a movie about one of his great players, George Gipp, who was a great player in the early 1900s. But Ronald Reagan, the President of the United States, played the role of I guess he played the role of George Gipp. Or Newt Rockne. But anyway, the movie went like this. Newt Rockne comes in at halftime and his team is dragging, and he says, he tells the story of George Gipp. He says, do me a favor. Go out the second half and win this one for the Gipper. And it was a famous movie with Ronald Reagan in it. And that kind of tells the story of we say great coaches, great leaders, or great motivators. It couldn't be anything further from the truth. I started reading a book years ago written by a college professor named B.F. Skinner at Harvard University, and he did some of the early great studies on what makes people perform better, called behavioral management. And he said this: behavior is a function of consequences. Now think of that. Behavior is a function of consequence. It's not so much what happens before the behavior, in other words, pep talks or whatever you may have before the behavior, but it's what happens after the behavior determines whether you're going to do that behavior more often. And that's so true, because he goes on in his studies, he says if someone does something that's good and they get positive reinforcement from somebody, says, attaboy, attagirl, good job, that's right, you'll probably end up doing it more often, because the consequence to what I did, I got attaboy, attagirl, I got reinforced. Now, he also says if you do something, good or bad behavior, and someone punishes you for it, they scream at you, they yell at you, they ridicule you, you'll do less of that. And we kind of all intuitively understand that, don't we? Here's a third thing that's a clincher. He also says in his studies that if you do a behavior and you have no reaction of positive reinforcement or negative reinforcement, then that behavior will recede and slowly diminish and go away. He then goes and says something else. In his studies, he says there's a direct correlation in any kind of a work environment, be it sports environment, work environment that you and I have, that there's a ratio of 4 to 1. The people that have a ratio of 4 positive comments to 1 negative comment get better results. Actually, I think it was like 3.8, 3.7, 3.9, so I rounded it off to 4 to 1. And the 1 is really important because you know how many people they think they're going to be motivators. And, they get a group of you in a room, and you have 5 in a room or 10 in a room or 100 in a room, and I want to congratulate all of you. Boy, what a great job you did today or last week or last month. You guys were great. We had a great quarter. Our revenues are up, but this was up, but that. Well, everybody didn't do great. Somebody, sloughed off. So that really doesn't have a lot of meaning. Many times I tell people, if someone tells you do a great job, ask them, what is it I did that was so great? But that manager, he's been reading the motivational books, right? So just motivate, just go and, tell them attaboy, attagirl, and not be specific about what they do. And that's where motivation mostly comes from. They never get specific and say, well, what it is that you did, you completed 9 of 9 passes, you picked up every 3rd down, you made every foul shot, or you knocked on 20 doors, and you only got 2 sales, but you wouldn't have got them without knocking on 20 doors. It's your reinforcement has got to be specific, and it's got to be timely. Well, what do you mean by timely? My wife, Linda's a gourmet chef. She cooks great every night. We have great dinners every night. And so what if I finally, say to her, that dinner you cooked 5 months ago, or 5 days ago, or 5 weeks ago, that was really a great dinner. Timing is wrong. The reinforcement has got to be timely and has to be specific. That chicken dinner you cooked last night, that fried chicken was just the best fried chicken I've ever had. Now, thank you so much. I enjoyed it so much. That's specific and it's timely. And that's important. Now, back to the 4 to 1. It's about being specific when you give reinforcement 4 times to 1 negative. Now, which also tells you that it's just not positive, 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 positive. If you're going to be a good manager and a good leader, you've got to be able to teach. You've got to be able to correct, because I'm not going to do everything right. I'm not going to get every answer to the test. I'm going to make mistakes. And if someone doesn't point out the mistake, then I'm not going to learn. But most people don't point out the mistake. They yell and scream and demean us. You're a lousy, no good, so-and-so, you're lazy, this generation is no good, you young people are not like it was when we were, you football players back in our days, we didn't have face masks, we had leather helmets, and you guys are not tough at all. That's what happens, right? Well, it's important that we're able to correct people. But what's important in Skinner's studies, you do it with the utmost of respect. You don't demean people. You don't chew them out. You don't yell and scream at them. The early coaches, when I came up, they were yellers and screamers. They thought the louder they yelled, the more they screamed, the more defamatory they were, the better impact they were going to have, because it shows that I'm strong and I'm going to drive you and kick you and so forth. That's so negative, and that's so non-productive. But we need to be corrected. If I throw that interception, my coach, if he was a good coach, would say, Fran, the reason that happened was not because you didn't intend it to be good, but you didn't read the defense right. See that safety man? That safety man was overloading to that side of the field, and therefore you were throwing against 2 people rather than 1, and so your chances of completion are diminished, and your chances of interception are more. And so it's a teaching moment, but doing it with respect. And that's what's so important to what you do. I took this whole behavioral principle and built a company. I worked with Fortune 500 companies, Fortune 1000 companies all across the country, teaching them the principles of behavior management, how to manage people on the factory floor, in a white-collar situation. And we saw just enormous improvements in productivity and so forth. But I'll tell you one of my first clients was in the textile industry. And the textile industry in the South back in the 70s was huge. Now it's all offshore. But there Burlington Mills, and there was a Dan River Mills, and there was a company called Deering Milliken down in Spartanburg, South Carolina, had 80 plants, and it was a well-run deal. And they had, and one of the plants was right there in Spartanburg, and I visited all these plants, and they had a plant manager, and these guys were really gruff and tough, and took no prisoners. And I'm sitting in this guy's office, and we've been teaching him the principles of B.F. Skinner, behavioral management principles, and he'd been learning, and they all learned, and they agreed and liked, but they sometimes just didn't quite get it. But this old guy was on the phone with one of his employees, one of his supervisors who worked under him as the plant manager. And I was sitting there, and he took the guy's phone call, and he just chewed this guy out. I mean, for about 5 minutes, he's telling him this and this and this, not with respect, not giving him specifics, but just chewing him out. And finally, at the end of the conversation, he recognized that I'm in the room, and he recognized that we've been teaching him behavioral principles of 4 positive to 1 negative. So he says to the guy finally at the end of the thing, he says, "Ralph, I owe you 1." So he remembered. And it was a 4 to 1 ratio. So if you want to improve your life, improve your way you get along with people, and it's all about relationships, and you want to make friends. Making friends is the most important part of business. Whether it's your people that you work with, your business partners, your employees, your customers, your prospects, the most important thing is to make friends, because people do business with the people that make friends, that build relationships. And if you take these principles and understand behavior is a function of consequences, it's not your stuff that you say on the front end, but when something happens, what's your reaction? How do you act then? And if that happens and you give the proper feedback, specific, timely, and make sure that you recognize the good behavior, you're going to get more performance. And we see coaches today applying this. Pete Carroll is a prime example. Boy, he wants the personal development of each individual, and he doesn't coach them as a 40-person team. They're individual 40 different people that he's got to handle differently. But the same principle that Pete Carroll uses and all the great leaders today use is the principle of B.F. Skinner, behavior management. Behavior is a function of consequence. It's not what happens before. The pep talk, the motivational talk, is what happens after the behavior that will get more of that good behavior that you want, and also less of the bad behavior that you don't want. So anyway, Billy the Kid, I hope this has been helpful to everybody. Do you have a question from any of our people?
Yeah, actually, we did get an online question. I'm going to throw it over to Harry the Hat down there to talk to you about it. I think it's a great opportunity for our listeners. So.
Okay.
Yeah, definitely an interesting one from Eric Nelson. Came in through the website on frantarkenton.com. He said, "Fran, you always talk about the importance of reading as a way to learn, which definitely makes sense. But his question was, what are some of your favorite books or your favorite book on business or leadership? What's something that you've learned from?"
Well, I have a lot of them, but recently I've read a book, Give and Take, by my friend Adam Grant. Adam Grant, maybe he's 35 years old. He's one of the most decorated professors at Wharton School of Business at the University of Pennsylvania, which is one of the great business schools around. And he wrote a book called Give and Take by Adam Grant. And really what he talked about, they're givers and they're takers. And the greatest leaders, the greatest managers are the ones that give, the ones that care, the ones that feel. Using the same principles we talked about, but he wrote a whole book on give and take at the business school at Wharton, and it's been a bestseller. So that's one that's been great for me. But I've read so many books. The Koch brothers, the famous Koch brothers, wealthiest private sector companies in the country, they've written books that are just great books, and And if you want to get more information about that, we'll give you information about a whole list of books that we had, including the Koch brothers books, which I think are great. But Give and Take by Adam Grant certainly is one of them.
All right. Yeah, great. Thank you.
Wonderful. Well, thanks everybody for joining us today. Thank you, Fran, for your time as always. We're going to continue to do these Hangouts, guys. So if you haven't already signed up, sign up on frantarkinen.com to get this information in advance. We'll see you here in a couple weeks. Thanks again, Fran.
Thank you.